In the smoke and rubble of the First World War, the world thought it had learned its lesson, millions dead, an empire shattered, a peace treaty designed to bind it all together. But beneath that fragile peace, seeds of bitterness, humiliation, and ambition lay hidden. Seeds that would one day grow into the most devastating war in human history. This is the story of how World War II happened, not just as a clash of armies, but as a clash of ideas, broken promises, and human error. The truth is complex, the villains are many, and the real causes go much deeper than invasions and treaties. The First World War ended in 1918. The peace that followed was supposed to heal. Yet in many ways, it only shredded the hopes of millions. Germany, defeated and bankrupt, was forced to accept the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. It lost territorial Alsace-Lorraine returned to France. Parts of Prussia went to the newly created Poland, and its colonial holdings were stripped away. But more damaging than geography was the humiliation. Article 231, the infamous War Guilt Clause, declared that Germany alone bore responsibility for the war. It was required to pay staggering reparations. The German economy, its industry, and its society were strained to the breaking point. Inflation ran wild. By 1923, the German mark had lost so much value that a loaf of bread costs billions. Savings were wiped out, the middle class was bankrupted, and the social order was shaken. The Weimar Republic, Germany's fragile democracy, was under constant siege from both the far left and the far right. Meanwhile, Europe's political map was redrawn. Old empires dissolved and new nations were born. The League of Nations was founded, but it was built on shaky ground, lacking real enforcement power and the full support of major world powers, including the United States. Then came the 1930s and the Great Depression. The global economic collapse didn't just hit America. It devastated Germany, Italy, Japan, and many others. Unemployment soared, starvation lurked in the shadows, desperation made people listen to loud voices promising simple answers, radical, authoritarian, and nationalist voices. In Germany, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party seized on this despair. They blamed the Treaty of Versailles, they blamed the politicians who signed it, and they blamed external enemies and internal scapegoats for all of Germany's problems. They promised to restore Germany's honor, its territory, and its power. In Italy, Benito Mussolini had already launched fascism, a movement built on a mythic return to the glory of the Roman Empire. In Japan, a growing imperial power felt constrained and humiliated by Western nations. Its resource-hungry economy and powerful militaristic elite saw war and expansion as not just possible, but necessary for survival and dominance. For all the warning signs, other world powers hesitated. Britain and France, the leading democracies in Europe, were strained under their own social, economic, and political crises. They vividly remembered the horrors of World War I and desperately hoped that another war could be avoided. They hoped Germany could be appeased. They believed that diplomacy and a few concessions could satisfy the aggressors. So, when Hitler began rearming Germany, in direct violation of the Versailles Treaty, and when he reoccupied the Rhineland in 1936, the West protested, but did little more. When Italy invaded Ethiopia, and when Japan seized Manchuria, there was international condemnation and some sanctions, but no decisive force was used to stop them. This policy of appeasement, giving in to some demands, in the hope of satisfying an aggressor, proved to be catastrophic. It didn't pacify the dictators, it emboldened them. It convinced them that the West was weak and would not stop them. It signaled that they could wage war on their own terms. So let's look at the key players and their ambitions. Adolf Hitler was determined to resurrect Germany's power, overturn Versailles, reclaim lost land, and build a vast new empire. His ideology was fueled by racism, anti-Semitism, and a belief in so-called Aryan supremacy. Benito Mussolini sought his own glory, dreaming of a new Roman Empire through conquests in Africa. Imperial Japan sought resources, recognition, and an end to Western dominance in Asia, driven by militarist officers and an expansionist ideology. France, haunted by past invasions, sought security above all else and wanted Germany permanently weakened. Britain was torn between upholding treaties and fearing another war. Hesitant to act due to its own financial weakness and concerns about its empire, Stalin's Soviet Union was suspicious of both Germany and the West, playing an opportunistic game and signing pacts when it was advantageous. And the United States, after World War I, had pulled back into isolationism, reluctant to get involved in European security. These pressures finally reached a boiling point. In 1935, Germany reintroduced military conscription and began building an air force. A year later, its troops marched back into the Rhineland. Aggression was becoming normalized. In 1938 came the Anschluss, when Germany annexed Austria. Then, Hitler set his sights on the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia with a large German-speaking population. At the Munich conference, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain agreed to Hitler's demands, returning home to famously declare he had secured peace for our time. It was a momentary, tragic illusion. In 1939, Germany demanded the city of Danzig and a corridor through Poland. Britain and France finally drew a line, guaranteeing Poland's independence. But then, in a move that shocked the world, Germany signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with the Soviet Union. On the surface, it was a non-aggression treaty. In secret, the two ideological enemies agreed to partition Poland between them. With his eastern flank secured, Hitler was ready. On September 1, 1939, German tanks rolled into Poland. Britain and France, honoring their promise, declared war. World War II had begun, but this war wasn't inevitable. It was the result of a series of catastrophic failures. The peace after World War I was built on punishment, not reconciliation. The Treaty of Versailles bred deep resentment in Germany, making its people willing to gamble everything on revenge. The global economic instability of the Great Depression created widespread desperation. When institutions collapse, extreme ideas that promise strength, order, and a restored national identity gain traction. This led to the rise of extremist ideologies, fascism in Italy, militarism in Japan, and Nazism in Germany. Fear and propaganda became powerful political tools. The democracies, weakened by war and economic crisis, were indecisive. Appeasement seemed cheaper and safer than confrontation. They failed to understand that the ambitions of dictators like Hitler could not be negotiated or limited. At the same time, aggressive expansion was not limited to Germany. Italy and Japan pursued their own imperial ambitions, their militaries acting with increasing autonomy. The international system designed to prevent war, the League of Nations, was too fragile to stop them. So, who is to blame? The answer is complex. Germany under Hitler bears the primary responsibility for its aggressive ideology and actions. But the Allied powers also share blame for a peace treaty that created more problems than it solved. And for failing to respond firmly to early acts of aggression, the global economic system that collapsed after 1929 created the conditions for extremism to flourish. The war did not spring out of nowhere. It was built, piece by piece, over 2 decades of broken promises, humiliation, fear, and radicalism. World War II changed everything. Tens of millions died, cities were burned to the ground, and atrocities were committed on an unimaginable scale. But the tragedy is not just what happened, it's that much of it could have been prevented. If diplomacy had been backed by strength, if justice had accompanied peace, if leaders had acted with moral clarity instead of fear, history isn't just dates and treaties. It's people, its choices, and its broken dreams. May we remember not just the battles, but the lessons, so that we never repeat the mistakes that led us down that darkest road. Thank you for watching. If you found this video insightful, please like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history.